You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter if it's good or bad. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com, follow us on Twitter at Michigan_Truth, and like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Episode 3 of the midweek edition is up and running and in session. Taylor Phillips, along with Ed Smith. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313. Ed, how are we doing this week?
Doing quite well, Taylor. Making some developments in other ventures in my life right now. Being very productive outside of whatever I'm doing, whether it be work, home, whatever you name it. Feeling very good right now. And tonight was a very interesting night for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So, got a few teams to cover, but first off, top story, the Lions get their centerman.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Center Frank Ragnow from Arkansas, the Razorbacks, at number 20 overall in the 2018 NFL draft. 2018 NFL draft. At first, we reacted, wow, that's a surprise. Was that really necessary? But then we got to keep in mind the Lions need a stronger offensive line. Still, Stafford was still not getting enough help last year. Frank Ragnow could actually provide maybe at least a little more help with the offensive line, not only for Stafford but the running backs as well, Amir Abdullah and others. So, Ed, a much-needed pick for the offensive line.
Oh, definitely, without question. You got to remember that even though Bob Quinn spent last offseason making as much of a big an upgrade to the offensive line as possible with the free agency acquisitions of T.J. Lang and Ricky Wagner, that unit, which I guess a combination of trying to gel together through that first new year, in addition to the multitude of injuries and other elements that caused him to have different combinations of lineup after lineup after lineup, week after week after week. So there was no surprise seeing that the end result, it was once again another year of poor production from the running game. But most importantly, or most concerned, Matthew Stafford, your franchise QB, getting sacked 47 times. So obviously, Bob Quinn, along with Matt Patricia, obviously the main objective as they embark on this new era, so to speak, is to protect Matthew Stafford at all costs, which makes sense. He's your franchise QB. You drafted him number 1 almost 10 years ago. You just gave him $135 million, where the hell it was. You know, he's one of the richest paid QBs ever, and you've got him all weapons, so now you need to invest in your project, you know, in your crown jewel. So what better way to do that is to give them a better offensive line. They'll obviously be better in pass protection, and at the same time, you could help churn out a little more better production from the running game, to where maybe there is a chance we will get a 100-yard rushing game from a running back this season. Here's hoping. So when you think about this projected line, either we'll see it at some point this season, but definitely moving forward, it's Taylor Decker At left tackle, Stafford's blindside. Left guard, you would assume they would take Graham Glasgow and transfer him back over to his more natural spot at left guard. Graham Glasgow, as we move on, he will be seen as either he will be let go or Travis Swanson. Yeah, he'll either be let go or he'll decide to be the backup to Ragnow. And then, of course, your right side with Lang and Wagner. That, on paper, that looks like a pretty damn good offensive line to run behind. I'm not saying it's Dallas or anything, but it seems adequate enough. And I think with Bob Quinn, he mentioned something last year of not feeling any regrets on passing on an Alvin Kamara. Who knows? Maybe he'll do the same thing this year, since considering the fact that he's already got Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick and Zach Sinner, and he signed LeGarrette Blount in the offseason. Maybe he feels there's not so much of a big need to go for a running back, per se, as to get an offensive lineman. So that way you kill two birds with one stone. Protect Stafford and help improve your running game, which in turn will take the pressure off of Stafford. But who knows? This draft has been so crazy so far already. I mean, you got Baker Mayfield going number 1 to the Browns. You got, a couple of running backs coming off the board before the likes of Darius Geis or Nick Chubb. It was good to see Stoney Michel get selected by the Pats near the end of the first round, as well as seeing a guy like Lamar Jackson, who, of course, was the 2016 Heisman Trophy winner the year before Baker Mayfield, getting his chance to prove himself by being the very last pick of the first round, being selected by the Baltimore Ravens, who traded up back into the first round to swap picks with the defending reigning Super Bowl champion Eagles. So it was a historic first round, considering the fact that this is the first time ever you see an NFL draft taking place from a live NFL stadium. I believe Detroit was considered one of the finalists, as Rod would explain to Dan Miller on the Fox 2 Lions, I guess you could say, pre-draft special / pre-game special. You just hope, he's also mentioned the possibility of Detroit being another finalist. I think if not 2019 or 2020, then definitely 2021 and beyond. But moving on to what the draft could bring, not just for now, but also for tomorrow night, when you consider that rounds 2 and 3 will now kickstart. Now you start to see more. You're going to see more players get snatched up quickly, and I wonder how early will we see more of these running backs get taken? Will we see Darius Geis out of LSU? Will he get snatched up if the Lions get a chance to take him? And the same thing goes for Nick Chubb, who was Stoney Michel's, battering mate back in Georgia. So that's two guys I would definitely look out for from the running back perspective. I thought that the Lions would probably try to shore up, help improve their defense a little bit more, and with the early picks, especially consider Patricia is a defensive coach. Just spent so many years coaching Bill Belichick's defense in New England. You would think, hey, maybe you sure help improve your defense, knowing that you need a pass rusher, you need a linebacker, and probably a safety. Since you picked up a corner in free agency from Seattle, so maybe you just need a safety, but still you need a linebacker and or a defensive line to help generate a semblance of a pass rush that you had none of last year, as well as stop and run, which also was your Achilles heel. So maybe you're hoping between rounds 2 and 3, you either take the best player available, you could try to find a pass rusher, or you try to find a linebacker. A couple of names do spring to mind immediately in this instance. If you think the defensive line, the big name that obviously jumps to mind is Mo Hurst from Michigan. But of course, the big red flag is his heart condition. How serious is it? He was cleared to do conditioning, but that's a whole different ball game than going outs and then preseason and training camp and then eventually a full bloated season, sometimes playoffs if need be. So you're wondering how much strain or stress could that do to his heart with the condition that he already has. So I guess that is a generalization of why teams did not pass it. Because again, if this issue did not come up, Hurst would have already been gone by, I would say, top 15, maybe top 10. But because this came up, it hurt his stock. So it's wondering to see if at all he will get drafted, and if so, where does he get drafted? For his sake, yeah, Michigan fan, but I also believe he's one of the best damn defensive tackles in the country. I think after him, between him and Deron Payne from Alabama, those were the two best D tackles in this draft. I was glad to see Payne go in the first round. I was hoping to see, hopefully the same can go for Mo in this next couple of days. But we'll see what happens with that end. Now, when it comes to linebacker, because I think that's another area that the Lions could improve on. You got a good pickup in Jared Davis last year, but you need to give him a tandem. You need to give him a dancing partner. You need to give him someone that he can make a comfortable tandem duo with if you want to go that route. And you know what? There is one guy that immediately springs to mind as well that I think could be a real massive improvement, and that is Shaquem Griffin. From Baylor. If you know of his story, I think it was a birth deficit or something. Long story short, he's known as being the player with, even though he has only one arm, one hand. One hand. He plays with so much heart, ferociousness, intensity, and drive. It's incredible to look at, and seeing what he's done at the combine. Knowing what his potential may be, that is a guy I would not mind the Lions taking a crack at, let's say, third round, fourth round at the latest, because, again, it gives you a tandem duo with him and Jared Davis, which instantly bolsters your linebacking core, similar to the way that signing Lang and Wagner last year did for your offensive line, or at least the right side of your offensive line. And seeing how fast and how Griffin flies at getting to the QB, it could give you a suede pass rusher, especially if Patricia wanted to transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense. You could fit a guy like Shaq Griffin, in my belief, his body type, the way he runs and plays. You could fit him in a 3-4 scheme where he could be either that hybrid, that edge rush, or that linebacker that you need. So I could see a place for Shaquem Griffin in this team. But again, if Bob Quinn wanted to surprise us and actually go to a running back, because the main objective is to help Matthew Stafford. So you already took care of one phase by getting him a better offensive line, which in turn will create linemen, rather, I should say, which will in turn create a better offensive line. And now you're wondering, hey, should we probably take a running back? Because this class is so stocked with backs, you'd almost feel foolish not to take one. And if so, who do you take if one is available? Does Darius Jice somehow fall into your lap in round 2? Or maybe, you're fortunate enough to take a guy like Nick Chubb. I don't know. But yeah, those would be the possibilities I would be thinking over if I was either Bob Quinn or Rod Wood tonight.
Yep. And the first two.
Oh, and a quick note. Sorry for the interruption. I mentioned last year of Stafford being sacked 47 times. It's worth noting that with Keith Ragnow, I think in his 40-game career, or at least the time that he started in Arkansas, he started 40 games.
Isn't his first name Frank?
Yeah, Frank Ragnow. How about that? Frank, another Frank in our midst. But in all of his games that he started while playing at Arkansas, he gave up 0 sacks. That had to have been obviously been an impressive number to Quinn and crew to think, okay, we should take this guy. So I hope he does well, because if he does well, Stafford does well. And Stafford does well, that moves this franchise. So they recognize that. I'm glad in a way they took care of that, and we'll see where it goes from here.
I can hardly wait until the fall.
Think about this. The people were predicting that the Bengals were going to get him, and then the Lions, they just fucking cut their nuts up. Cut their nuts right up under them one pick before. It reminded me of the 2013 draft when the Jacksonville Jaguars actually snagged Denard Robinson one pick before the Lions were going to take him. So it's nice to see someone else be on the other end of that spectrum for once.
Yeah. But the first two, but all that stuff about who the Lions could have drafted and who they could pick later on can be spoilers, already spoiled, but still could be recap questions in our 5 questions segment. So
right. Another name to look out, by the way, for would be Harold Landry from Boston College. There's another guy you don't want to look over.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll get to that a little later on in this episode. But speaking of the Michigan Wolverines,
Touchdown, Michigan!
quarterback Shea Patterson is granted immediate eligibility by the NCAA, according to thescore.com. ESPN.com says the NCAA is expected to let Patterson know soon whether or not he'll be able to play this season. So his decision is very close. That's all we know for the moment, but he's much needed if granted to play this season.
Yes, especially in the wake of Wilton Spade officially transferring to UCLA. That was something I alluded to when we discussed that news on a previous episode. Maybe the last time we talked. Who knows? Because it's been 2 weeks since we talked. But maybe Spade heard rumblings through the grapevine that there was a good chance that Patterson would be cleared. He would be ruled eligible. And he saw this chance to, and with the situation in UCLA, they just lost Josh Rosen to the draft, and thinking, hey, this is a good chance for him to snoop on. So good for Spade in that regard. But again, was something that Michigan fans wanted. Harbaugh obviously wanted. He alluded to that a couple of times in his podcast. So it looks like he's going to get his wish. You don't want to get too excited and yell peanut butter jelly time, because Michigan fans have had a habit of doing that, myself included, now over the past 10 years, and it's been a rude awakening of sorts whenever you try to get our hopes up too high. So, granted, I'm glad and happy that this is looking like it will be a positive situation for the Michigan Wolverines. But there's still a lot of things to take into consideration. It wasn't just subpar QB play that sunk our season last year. It was an ineffective offensive line. It was the inability to run the ball effectively in key moments. It was the wide receivers not being truly developed. So all those things, when you tie in the fact that, the Harbaugh this past offseason had to make some moves with his offensive coaching staff, whether it be Tim Drebno got shown the door. I think Pep Hamilton is not coming back either. I may be wrong on that. Harbaugh had to make some moves, because otherwise that seat was going to get hotter and hotter for him. Even though his job is relatively secure, it would have, you would have heard more rumblings get louder and louder if some moves were not made at the very least. So between that and now this apparent ruling on Patterson going in their favor, I would feel very satisfied if I was Jim Harbaugh right now.
Oh, yeah. Can hardly wait for that decision, too. So, why don't we get to baseball real quick?
That one is long gone.
Tigers dropped 2 of 3 to the Pittsburgh Pirates, the drunken sailor, as urinating Tree would say. They take the first game 13-10 and then lose 8-3 and 1-0 in a pitcher's duel involving Michael Fulmer earlier today, or yesterday. Tigers are now 1-5 against the Pittsburgh Pirates. They have the Baltimore Orioles coming up at Camden Yards this upcoming weekend. Friday and Saturday at 7:05, Sunday at 1:05. The Tigers swept the Orioles at Comerica Park. And then they took 2 of 4 against another terrible team in the Kansas City Royals at home. It seems like they ooze mediocrity, but the weight on the outside. But when you look at it, when they take when they only split a series with a terrible team in the Kansas City Royals, a division rival in the AL Comedy Central, you would figure that this team would be worse than mediocre.
Yeah, they would be on the down path towards absolute shit show. So it was cute and fun for a while, seeing this little winning streak. I would probably get wins too if I was beating up with the likes of the Orioles.
Except it only favored Chris Ilitch.
Right. So now that we're seeing things come down to earth, now mind you, they haven't even played the Indians yet. So God help them when that bloodbath begins.
They played the Indians at Progressive Field.
Oh, that's right. I'm thinking about at-home series. It's going to get ugly, though. When I guarantee you, they're going to take our bats and beat each and every one of us inside the fucking heads with them.
I personally can't wait for it.
Yes. We're such sadists. Anyway, it's going to be a long road, but it always is when you're considering the 162 games, several month long season that is Major League Baseball. So, can this team get to 100 losses is the big question. I say yes, as long as they don't fuck around in September like they did last year. I've seen, some of the tweets saying, should we trade Michael Fulmer, should we not? I understand the scenario because, again, this should be considered the rebuild, so to speak. I don't know why you wanted to hire Rod Gardenhire if you were in the middle of a rebuild right now, but hey, I'm not Chris Ilitch. I'm not Al Avila. I don't make these calls, but that's not one I would have made. But again, hey, it's not my team. I don't pay the money. I don't get right. I don't write the checks. I don't do all that shit. So I'm just some snarky fan with an internet connection and a phone. So, but as it comes to Fulmer, this is a different situation from the Justin Verlander thing last year, where Fulmer's still young. It's not like he's approaching the late stages of career and he needs one last shot to win the ring. The way Verlander was, this is completely different. He's young, a lot of potential, has great stuff. Won the Rookie of the Year, So it's definitely a piece you would want to hang on to as much as you can. If you got a big juicy offer, yes, take it, but it's a comparable situation to maybe a Dylan Larkin or Andres Anthony or Anthony Mantha for the Wings. Would that be a fair comparison?
Yeah, I would say so.
So granted, people they understand it's going to take a while and it's going to be painful, and they may not want to see some of their young players, especially a guy like Fulmer, go through that type of thing. But hey, that is the price you pay sometimes in this kind of business. But I would guarantee you that if Fulmer were to go through this, it would actually make him a better, tougher, stronger player. So if best case scenario for me, if I'm a Tigers fan, yes, I hope they tank. Yes, I hope they lose 100 games. Mm-hmm. But I hope they keep some pieces around so that when the rebuild finally comes to fruition, they'll be reserved, they'll be stocked, and they'll be, considered a title contender for years to come, like they were in this past decade stretch when they had this massive window and couldn't do shit about it. Now, hopefully, when the next time arrives for them, they will be able to do something about it. I've also used the comparison before. I've always used them as an example, but the Philadelphia 76ers, what we've seen them do with the process has been a great example on how to do, recently at the very least, on how to do a rebuild. I mean, for God's sakes, people thought they were going to be a contender next year or even 2020. Not right now. They said, fuck that, our time is now. So I'm not saying it's going to play out exactly like that for the Tigers, but you would have hope as long as they do what they're supposed to do, and not try to pull Pistons at the end of the year, or the Red Wings at the end of the year, win meaningless games that's going to fuck up their draft position. They should be good long term when it's all said and done as to how this whole plan came together.
Good luck to them trying to do so with Ron Garbage Fire. So, speaking of the Pistons,
Left sideline, 3, and he answers.
Pistons owner Tom Gores and head coach and team president Stan Van Gundy last week said they would resume talks this week. Now, prior to that news coming up last week, we expected Stan Van Gundy to be retained. He has 1 year left on his contract, and he's probably stuck in Detroit. But after that, I've heard a lot of fans on Twitter. I read a lot of tweets from fans that that the team might fire Stan Van Gundy, but still, I'm sticking to my gut. I think they're going to retain him.
Well, here's the thing. That could be a possibility. There could be a scenario where Stan Van Gundy will agree to step down as coach, but still remain on as president of basketball operations, and the Pistons try to find themselves a new coach. if that were the case, there are obviously some candidates, some spots, some names that would immediately pop over to you, whether it be a Vinny Del Negro, a Jason Kidd, Mark Jackson, or even a possible, dark horse, so to speak, David Fisdale. But that's only if SVG wasn't brought back as coach, and as we're expecting to be brought back as coach. But that was just my little fun scenario, fantasy booking type of deal.
Yeah, I would choose door number 3.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll find out later this weekend if Stan Van Gundy is retained or not, or if he even talks conclude or have a part 3, at least. So, one more team, the Grand Rapids Griffins, to cover. They have tied up their series at 2 games apiece with a Manitoba Moose with a Game 5 winner-take-all tomorrow at 7 at Van Andel Arena on Wood Radio, 1300 and 106.9 FM in Grand Rapids. That's the first round of the 2018 Calder Cup Playoffs. Bob Kaiser and Larry Frigurski, two of the most slappiest minor league play-by-play and color announcing duo that I have ever heard in my life. But they've got the action for you. But Moose, Griffins, this one's going to go either way. Griffins have home ice. They're coming off a 3-0 win. Matt Ford scoring 2 goals earlier tonight. I think they have momentum. We'll see. I'm not making a prediction, but the Griffins may just have the edge here in Game 5. So, that being said, it's time for 5 questions added. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth.
Like I said, the first 2 questions are spoilers, are now recap questions. Question number 1, that being said, who could the Lions have drafted in the first round?
In terms of who they could have picked in the first round, there was a good chance that, what was that guy, that kid's name from Florida, Balin Bacon or something, that he went to Jacksonville later on. There was a good chance he would have gotten taken. I think a lot of people were expecting Harold Landry from Boston College. I think that could have been the possible consensus pick of who they should have taken. So I'm going to say that maybe they probably should have gone with Harold Landry. But again, Quinn feels confident to say the main priority is to protect Stafford. So this is what we're going with, and they did what they had to do. But I think if you were to ask a Lions fan who they should have gotten, I think Harold Landry would be a lot of the first name that comes out of their lips for a lot of them.
Next question.
Question number 2, who can they pick later on in the draft?
Well, I already gave them to you earlier, so here's the names again. You can take a Shaquem Griffin in maybe the 3rd or 4th round, give him a linebacker to pair up with Jared Davis. You can give, if you want to go run back option, Nick Chubb could be available. Darius Jice somehow is still on the table, still on the board, I should say. There's lots of guys that you can choose after to go at. Not to mention the hordes of other defensive players, corners, tackles, safeties, all of that. You're always going to find a diamond in the rough in this draft, so it doesn't hurt to try and search one out. I wouldn't be surprised if they take another offensive player, let's say, another wideout or something like that later in the draft. I think that's what they did with Galladay last year. I think it was their 7th round pick or something like that. He was a late round pick. So I could see them taking a wideout with their 6th or 7th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Question number 3. Can Shea Patterson play for the Michigan Wolverines this upcoming fall?
Yeah, absolutely. As all reports are to believe, not only he's definitely going to be eligible, and he's going to be eligible immediately. So now the question is, once, if and when this gets cleared, how you're going to implement him or integrate him into the system that you're doing, unless if you're not doing that already. How are you going to handle his mobility, how he moves in and out of the pocket? Are you going to, script up plays that specifically, like certain package plays for him that only, where it's like a Denard Robinson type of deal where you're going to keep the ball in his hands no matter what. So I could see that as potential strategy forming here. And that's all that would come to mind for me for that one.
Next question.
Question number 4, can the Tigers actually keep a mediocre record, or will they tank later on? I'd say tank.
The smart thing would be to tank, but it's not a promise. It's not a guarantee. So it's pretty much a up in the air 50-50 coin flip.
Yep. We'll see what happens. The Tigers are going to have to play some tougher teams later on this season, so
that's promising.
Yeah. We may see a tank more than a mediocre record.
Well, hashtag march to 100 losses then.
Yeah. Tank against Chris Ilitch. How about that?
Next question.
And finally, question number 5, also a recap question. Do we expect Pistons owner Tom Gores to retain Stan Van Gundy for the final year of his 5-year contract?
More than likely, yes. And I think he's going to give him a strong, basically a strong warning, a strong heating that, hey, you got to do something here. Make the playoffs or have a good start. We can't have a slow start at all. You got to do this, got to do that. Or else I would consider firing you before the season is over. Or if we just don't make the playoffs, we're just going to part ways anyway. Or they make the playoffs and get their asses swept. Well, let's see what happens. I could actually see Gores bringing him back for another year if they make the playoffs, even if they get swept. So we'll see. But if Gores, without question, Stan is gone if they don't make the postseason next year.
All right. That wraps up our 5 questions segment. So to our entire audience, if you want to answer those 5 questions, just replay that segment portion of this episode and answer them the best you can without going out of line. Now for the other segment.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your grade.
Just one event. The Lions selecting center Frank Ragnow from Arkansas with the 20th overall selection in the 2018 NFL Draft. To be fair, I would grade it an A-. Like Frank Ragnow and Buck Gino pointed out, like you guys pointed out off the air before this podcast, not the best center in the draft, but like I pointed out, he's still pretty damn good, and it's a much-needed hole to fill to protect Matthew Stafford and the running backs.
I agree with your reasoning. I think I'll have a slight disagreement on your grade. I will have no problem giving him a B+, at least the very least a B, but definitely a B+, for the reasons that you mentioned earlier. This was not a sexy pick by any stretch of the imagination, but if everything turns out the way it's supposed to down the road, this will be looked at as a huge building block pick. So I think that is the general long-term consensus, the general idea that Patricia and Quinn and Wood wants to help establish. So picks and moves like this is one part of it. Obviously, they wouldn't have made this type of pick if they had any type of confidence that this was going to work out for them in the long term. So best of luck, and we'll see where it goes. But at the very least, I'm going to be very cautious and steady and say, hey, this is a B+ pick. If it turns out to be an A or A+ player, I'll be more than happy to eat crow on that one.
Yep. I'm going to point out that I don't really need it to be a sexy pick, but I just wanted to get the job done every single damn time. So that's our What's Your Grade segment. So for our audience, if they have a grade for that event, post it in the comment bank in this episode, and please don't go out of line. That's episode 3 of the midweek edition. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media and have their friends share that as well, because you want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth podcast is in search of a wider local audience that is fans of sports. So please spread the word about the Michigan Sports Truth podcast, its Facebook page, and its Twitter handle at Michigan_Truth. Excellent job, Ed Smith. We'll talk to you again next week.
No problem. You have a good one. Everybody else, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the NFL draft. Enjoy some hockey, some playoff hockey, and enjoy some NBA basketball playoffs. Hopefully LeBron and the Cavs get it done tomorrow night, move to the second round. And hey, we got a Game 7. Bucks Celtics Saturday night on TNT.
And the Vegas Golden Knights are destroying the San Jose Sharks from what I'm
How about that?
Oh my God.
Team, baby. How about that? Do not be surprised if they end up in the finals. Probably them in Pittsburgh.
Oh my, I guess so. So, I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and EdSmith313. We'll talk to you next week on episode 4, the midweek edition. Thanks very much for listening and downloading and sharing TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Mission complete.